That's exactly what it was. The Pope basically coming out here was basically just the last bastion of the United States. Now, if you notice, all the white people really had a problem with the guy. They really had a problem with him coming out here and doing whatever it is that he was supposed to do. They really not feeling the fact that he's out here telling them what to do, and the fact that this whole thing is getting shut down. They're referring to him now as a communist and all types of stuff. And you know, when white men start talking about communism, what he's really talking about is the fact that somebody is basically coming out against free range capitalism. The problem with capitalism is that there is no end to the spending in it. Capitalism is based on consumption. You understand? It's based on the ability to perpetually. Right? Just go in the room, I'll bring it to you. Capitalism. Give me a second, guys. Always from the phone, right? It's alright, baby. He just came to ask me, and I just needed to get it. Yeah, it was basically just the deposition of the fact that capitalism as a whole, as a productive system of social progression, is basically petered itself out, because capitalism itself has to sustain itself based upon the idea of perpetual consumption. But nobody can perpetually consume something to the point of gluttony, because once you reach that level of the game, then what happens is there's nothing left for anyone else. And what's happened in the so-called capitalist system is just that there's nobody else to spend anything else, because the basic inference of the United States has collapsed in on itself due to the fact that it cannot pay for its own lifestyle anymore. It can't pay any more money out, because the currency of the United States is the dollar bill. The dollar bill, though, as a currency, is evidence, again, of the United States debt. So you see, nobody has ever paid for anything. Everybody has been perpetually using debt to split with debt. So the way that the United States works is to perpetually stay in debt. That's what allows the United States to function as a quasi-country. And that's what it's been doing for the past 240 years. These MOORs on the screen that you see now are just evidentiary evidence of the fact that we as Moors, or so-called black people, have always been at the forefront of what we refer to, or what they refer to, as Western civilization. Western civilization as a whole was based on the Vasa state and the destruction of the Moors. Period. All of America, all of the history of what we understand as America, is based upon the destruction of these people. Not the Indian, not anybody else, specifically us. Which is why the state of flux that black people find themselves in to this day is a constant state of devaluing themselves. You understand? So based on that, we've been saying that we were always from here, and that we ain't never been taken from nowhere else. And now everything in the universe is coming out to support this fact. Let's look. Let me see. Yes, universal law per se. So the basis of that has always been that, right? Let me get this other one. Now we've been talking about, again, we've always been from here, nobody else or whatever, and that this has always been Northwest Africa, Northwestern Mexico. They tell us no, this is the United States, and that we ain't never been here, or that this place has always been America. Well, that was until, if I could just pull it up for a second. Hold up. Sorry. This computer's kind of bugging. Okay. That's just what I was about to show you. So I'm showing you right now, as they say, right now. On the left side of your screen, you see your man. This is Malik Anbar. This is the MOOR that ran what we now today call New Delhi, or India even, or Pakistan. This was all Bombay. 250 million year old piece of Africa found in the southeastern U.S. Larger portions may still be discovered. Continental breakups are proving that just as destructive some human separations. Geologists have found a fragment of Africa embedded in southwestern U.S., a remnant of the rift that occurred between the two continents some 250 million years ago. Now, on the rift part, they talk about the rift, the actual continental divide, but they're also talking about the rift between the empire itself, coming from super ancient times to now. That's right. He said that in the 1920s. Here we are having to wait to what? 215 for the so-called white people to actually come out and say the opposite. And actually tell the truth. But that's what the prophet said he would do. He said, I'll make the European tell you the truth, right? So in that, there was an attempt to whip away Florida from southern Georgia, right? And what they found was they found the same magnetism in the ore, in the rock itself, that matches that of Africa. But look at the portion they showed. So basically all of this, right, is northwestern, southwestern Africa. Okay? So that deads all of the science, all of the stuff that they've been saying. A stretch of rock in the southeastern U.S. has African origin. So again, they're talking about all of us over here. Now, it's funny that most of the civilizations on the eastern coast of the United States are just that. Excuse me, the eastern, southeastern, northeastern aspects of the United States, North Central, South America. Boom, right? Here's some more evidence to corroborate what it is we're talking about. Other less importance of likeness between, which one? Okay, let me read one first. Easily with the Christian nations, and thus as it were touching very hem of the board of civilization, Climate adds to the attractions to this region, which is removed from the cold of the north and burning heat to the tropics, while it is enriched with oranges, citrons, olives, figs, pomegranates, luxuriant flowers. Its position and character invite a singular suggestive comparison. It is placed between the 29th and the 28th degrees of north latitude, occupying nearly the same parallels of the so-called slave states of our Union. It extends over nearly the same number of degrees longitude of our slave states, which seem now, alas, to stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the Rio Grande. It is supposed to embrace 700,000 square miles, which cannot be far from the space comprehended by what may be called the Barbary states of America. Nor does the comparison end. Algiers, for a long time, most obnoxious place in the Barbary states of Africa, the chief seat of Christian slavery, and once branded by the indignant chronicler as the wall of the barbarian world. It is situated near the parallel of 3630 north latitude, being the line of which is termed the Missouri Compromise, marking the wall of Christian slavery in our country west of the Mississippi. There you go. So right here it says that this is the Barbary states of America, that we was enslaving Christians over here. Right? Other less important parts of likeness between the two territories may be observed. They are each washed by the same extent by ocean and sea. With the difference, the two regions are thus exposed directly opposite coasts, the African Barbary being bounded in this way on the north and west, and our American Barbary on the south and east. Now that corresponds with what the article just said about this portion of Africa being on the southeastern side, right? But there are two more spaces on the surface of the globe of equal extent, and examination of the map will verify what I'm about to state, which present so may be distinctive features of resemblance, whether we consider the parallels of latitude on which they lie, the nature of their boundaries, their productions, their climate, or the peculiar domestic institution which has sought shelter in both. Guess what that is? Exactly. You call Virginia the Barbary of the Union, right? Because that's where the House of Burgess was, and this is where the Moors was enslaving these people in Virginia, which we'll get into in a minute, right? I introduce these comparisons in order to bring home to your minds as near as possible the precise position and character of the territory which was the seat of the evil I am about to describe. It might be worthy of inquiry why Christian slavery, banished at last from Europe, banished also from that part of the hemisphere which corresponds to the latitude of Europe, should have entrenched itself in both hemispheres between the same parallels of latitude, so that the Virginia, Carolina, Mississippi, and Texas should be the American complement to Morocco, Algiers, Tripoli, and Tunis. You heard? Perhaps in the common peculiarities of the climate, breeding indolence, lassitude, and selfishness. Islam. So again, straight to the point, we always was here, and what this corresponds to again is the fact that we always was here. The complexion of the Carolina Indians is black, not much different from that of the Ethiopians. Their hair is black and thick and not very long, tied behind the head like a small tail. As for the physique of these men, they were well proportioned, of medium height, a little taller than we are. They have broad chests, strong arms and legs, and other parts of the body are well composed. They are broad in the face and have big black eyes. They have a sharp cunning and are agile and swift runners. Right? Because the physical prowess of the original man is what scares them even more. Which is why they had to play up the physicality of the Moors, so that way they could get away from the mental aptitude. They want to make it seem like we're more physically apt for everything than mental. That the civilizations that we had were not civilized because they were not Christian. Right? But what Christian basically means is Cretan, which means enslaved. Right? So this is from 1524. So this is the Indians from the Carolina, meaning the Moors. Same exact. You understand? Okay. So as we have already basically deduced that this is Barbary here in America, this would also understand why we would find images like this here in America. This is from Copan, one of the steles of the ancient Moors of Hanuman or whatever here in America. Now, what do you see? What are these things? Exactly. Exactly. So you mean to tell me that there was elephants over here in America during the time of the Olmecs, where they was actually riding elephants and all of that? But it makes sense if we look at America as an extension then of Barbary. And Barbary, we know, came out of the original kingdoms that was set up in Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, and Morocco, which really represent the kingdoms of the Hamathites, the Amorites, the Hittites, and the Canaanites, who collectively came together under the banner of Ruth, right, which is where the trust was set up through Ruth, the Moabites, in which they now became Moabites collectively, and then asked permission from the pharaohs of Egypt, right? Okay. Um, Now, when it says that they asked permission from the pharaohs of Egypt, what we got to also do the knowledge to then is what Egypt they talking about, or the fact that the new science that they then came out with was that Egypt knew no pharaohs. It was never ruled by pharaohs. Also reveals in his own word one of the biggest myths. Based on this ancient history, concludes that ancient Egypt was ruled by kings and queens, not by pharaohs. The king of Egypt had 5 titles. None of those titles was pharaoh or something resembling it. If Egypt was never known to pharaohs, then Moses never has put foot on the ground of the Exodus, right? The card must be adapted to the promised land. The promised land is what Martin Luther King and them was talking about, right? So if they weren't pharaohs of Egypt over there, then they must be talking about the pharaohs then over here. The only tribe that dealt with the pharaohs, or that called themselves that to this day, was anyone? We talked about them before. Anybody remember the name of that so-called tribe? Yes, the Montakas. Very good, Mo. Yes, aka the Montaukes, right? So that means when they was asking permission from the pharaohs of Egypt to come over here and set up kingdoms, then that means that they was actually asking the Montakan people, right, who was already over here calling themselves pharaohs, if they could come back and reestablish themselves. Once the pharaohs and them said yeah, then they set themselves up kingdoms here and then set up the analogous kingdoms over there that we now today know as the kingdoms of Barbary. Right, they were pharaohs, not pharaohs, right? Right. So on top of all of that now, what we also got into was the fact that if this is the case, then that means that a lot of these so-called people call themselves Kemites and stuff like that, right? They're dealing with Egypt in the new dynastic phase because they're referring to themselves as Ra and all that, right? Right. Get this other one. Let me see. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Yes, the Montauk Indians were Egyptians, aka they are the so-called ancient Egyptians, or the ones that was already here, right? But in the pretext, they were called the Naphtali or the Nephi, right? So in 1 Kings 7:13, it says the kings were called the Nephi, giving honor to both the original Nephi as well as the new king. One of the best known public examples of the name change is that when it occurs at the time of the Roman Catholic pontiff takes office. The Pope not only receives a new name, but also as part of the enthronement ceremony, dons the new robes of his office and calling. The receipt of the throne name is, of course, a regular feature of modern as well as ancient medieval royal ascension rites. Right? Uh, the new names.
You want me to write it? You read it while you teach.
Yeah.
You want me to write it what I'm thinking?
Okay. Right? The giving or possession or possessing of a second name to be kept hidden from others is widely attested in antiquity among both the mortals and divinities. One Egyptian designation for a god was Amenophem, whose name means the hidden one. The myth of Re and Isis, attested from the 20th dynasty papyrus, shows the importance of the hidden name of God, as well as the true name of Re. According to this myth, Isis desired to learn the hidden name of Re so that she might gain some power that he possessed. Since Re had become old, he had frequently drooled. Isis took some of Re's saliva, which had fallen to the ground, kneaded it with the earth, and formed a serpent in the shape of a pear. Remember Rick Ross was talking about the pear? Like, oh yeah, pears, shout out to pears, right? Subsequently, the serpent bit him, causing him to cry out in pain as the flame of life began to depart from him. Isis offered to alleviate Re's suffering through magic, an art which he was particularly adept, if he would agree to reveal her his secret name. Her repetition of names were already known to her, but it refused to provide him any relief until Re finally tormented and in the depths of his despair revealed the secret name to her. In Vedic Indian, besides the name for general, right, the name Nama, a second. The name Nama, Circassian trusted tutor, was given to a child immediately after the birth. In the Greek magical text, the spirits and demons are also described as having hidden names. The intratestamental literature and other writings of the ancient Judaism and early Christianity refer to the hidden name. In Enoch 1, the fallen angel Kazbael, Becca, right, or Becca, requests that Michael disclose to him his secret name so that he would memorize this secret name of his, so that he would call it up in an oath, in order that they shall tremble before and this might and power of the oath. He then revealed to these the children of the people. Now the people refers or is another way of saying Lenape. Right. In rabbinic literature, the 4-letter, a 12-letter, or 42 or 72-letter hidden name is also apparent. Now, this is from a Mormon text called the Litany. What is it called? The Litany of Re. Here's an excerpt from it. That's not it. The names of Re is an adaptation from the name Bey, a title given to the Moors by the Sultan during the Ottoman reign, as was the title Il in respect to the divine authority in any chosen field of endeavor. Meaning any field that you chose to get into, if you had the Il and Bey name added, you would always go to the top of it in whatever field or endeavor or undertaking that you involved yourself in, so long as you had that name. So that means that the name Re that we refer to in ancient Kemet is actually the public aspect of the real private name, the God name, which is Bey. The Spaniards adopted these titles to denote personages of high honor and esteem, and elevated their modern meanings. Okay.
A day or two. She's gonna be in your debt, and it's gonna be a blessing for you in the long run.
Okay.
She might not stay, but I can at least
Okay.
take her. At least you can go out. It's hard to take your time. You have some needs to yourself. We can go somewhere.
Okay. Stripping the title of denunciation of the religion of Islam under the threat of death, bodily harm, or plunder. Naturally, the children had no alternative, so they were herded into monasteries, indoctrinated, put across Portuguese ships, transported to America, sold to some other European nation. The idea of Christianizing Moors was so great that it became the duty of all plantation owners to make exponential effort to teach their cargoes Christianity immediately after they arrived, for fear that the Spaniards had not completed the job. The Moors who had Spanish names were compelled to change them in preference to European nation or nationality group to which they had been sold. This is why you find 1619 episodes from Jamestown, Virginia, related to Moors having Spanish names. There were many subsequent landings thereafter bearing human cargoes of slaves, all of which had Spanish names, right? Even the warped history of the colonial period. We'll respect this and explain how the names were changed, right? Later, the plantation owners went into a special breeding process which separated slaves according to pigmentation of their skins. Because of the lucrativeness of the trade, the European historians and men of letters found principle of separation of the races by a color scheme in order to facilitate the status of a slave within European society. There were no regulatory restraints upon men of letters who devised and revised standards at will with no thought of what harm a classification and categorization would promote in the future. Besides the havoc caused in stripping away of the Moorish culture, there was also a factor of divisionalism among European nations in matters of government and religion. The Roman Catholic religion was beset on all sides with strife and confusion, mistructed by poor and rich factions of Europe alike, held together only by the coalition of the might of the church and regent working hand in hand to keep the peasant or serf population of Europe under control. The peons of Europe were in a high state of agitation, and Christendom broke up into many denominations, concentrated into what is now today known as Protestantism or Protestantism, Anglicization, and Catholicism. The Bible had been devised by the Vatican and subjected to many revisions by a score of European scholars, finally crystallizing into the King James Version in 1611. This book was one of the main instruments in teaching our people. Now, again, this is from a Mormon book called the Litany of Re. So this is why the Mormon, like I told you, there's a lot of science in the Mormon stuff that they leave out specifically due to the fact that they don't want nobody to really do the knowledge to the fact that the Mormons is really practicing more science. Right? So in that, when you see these Kemite people and they talk about how they don't rock with Moors and stuff like that or whatever, you can chuckle to yourself. You can ask them, like, yeah, but you rock with Ray, right? You believe in Ray, right? And you're like, okay, well, great. You're an Egyptian high priest. What's the hidden name of Ray? They're going to look at you like you crazy. Because they don't know that. The reason they don't know that is because they're referring to themselves as Kemites or Egyptians. However, the Egyptian culture was really a Moorish culture. And that there was no such thing, if there was no such thing as a pharaoh, then if they're wrong with that, then they might be wrong with some other things too, right? Now, this is an old stele. This is a stele that's found over in Nubia, and the inference on it is those subjugated by Re. Now look at that. You see the Fez. Exactly. This is why they deaded Fox News right after that. Right after that, they deaded it. Right? Yeah, because they understand what it's because the high elders in that understand what it's about. I'm gonna show you the high elders of the Mormon Church in a second. But this is to show you. This is the subjugation of the infidels of the things by Re, which means by Bay. Ain't this what the Moors do? Come with the scimitar. You see the scimitar, right? Ready to cut the heads. That's right. The Zul al-Fakar. Alhamdulillah, right? Okay, let me get this. Everything in this country they got essentially from us in that way, right? Everybody heard of the term. How many people have heard the term hillbilly? Oh, he's a hillbilly, right?
You gotta move quick.
This is the Hillabys or the Hillabays. So when they talk about the Beverly Hillbillies, the Hillbillies were a group of Moors called the Hillabays out of Khalifa. Exactly. When they talk about the Hillbillies or whatever, they're talking about the Hillabays. That's these people. The Hillabee deputies, meaning that they had a government, right? gets better.
I told the neighbor downstairs, you know, there's a joke on you that you do laundry every day and you monopolize the laundry machine and laundry stuff. As soon as I went downstairs, the nigga took all my shit out and put everybody in the building, the white was here. He's always like, what's with this guy doing laundry? I said, he's obsessed with the laundry.
He's a
This
germaphobe.
nigga touched my period, panties, all that. But you know what, you faggot, do that. I took my clothes out the dryer. I said, no, I'm using the dryer next door for my sheets. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna think, I'm gonna use it. I said, I don't like this dryer. I'm gonna use my other shit, don't worry.
Exactly.
So now I wait till night to do my other loads because this nigga's obsessed with the fucking washing machine.
Yes.
Thank you.
Crazy.
I told him, though, I said, there's a joke on you. Everybody think you do laundry way too much. And you monopolize the machine. Told him straight up. He's like, oh, I don't even want my clothes in this dryer. You don't know what the fuck I mean.
This, exactly. Another term that don't apply to these people. Matter of fact, these are the elders. These are the first elders of the Mormon church. John Rock, Elijah Abel, or they refer to him in life as Elijah Abdiel, and Elder Greenflake. The Greenflake family is one of the biggest, oldest Mormon families in, from the beginning of the so-called movement. And as you can see, none of these people are Caucasian. Inshallah. See what I'm saying? That's what I was going to say. How you going to have a Mormon church and the God of the Mormon church is the Moroni, right? Who were from the ancient Nephites, right? The ancient Nephi. This is what they refer to them as in the thing, which means that they're the ancient pharaohs, right? That's why when the postmaster went and asked them to show them pictures of their gods or whatever, the gods of the Mormons or whatever, you showed them this. They like, oh, well, who are these people? And it's like, oh, well, this is the Moroni. Right? Look at them with the malachite stones on the cedar wood in burnished brass. So that means that the gods that the people who started the Mormon church followed, all of those gods made salat and stuff like that. So that means it's you. You see him, right? And this is supposed to be in America. With camels. Just like we saw the picture of the Moors with the elephants.
ain't having no fucking problems here like that. You wanna come here, bitch, fine. At the end of the day, you want to chill out and take a walk and be like, yo, go for it, give you some sleep. That's good. You think she won't take it. That should feel bad. You're not
Indeed.
family. I said, I'm just glad you're not family because I've been there with no
With
family.
nobody.
I told her that. And I've been on this show. And I can take my master's and my degree and shove it up my ass. Fucking figure out where the fuck you at.
That's right. It's a good thing.
And when I'm in New York, I last thing like shit. I paid for my own way.
Mm-hmm.
Now that bitch know about New York. Couldn't get you, bitch. You better fucking
Mm-hmm.
yeah. You can't watch the other day.
Every time. This is a photograph of two Canaanites in Palestine before the genocide. These are descendants of the Canaanites, Philistines, who were mentioned in the Bible. So when they talk about the Palestinians that they're killing and shooting and blowing up over there, this is the Palestinians they're talking about. The Arab people we see on TV, that's just for American TV. But the actual people they bombing and flipping on all that is black people. Same way they did in South Africa. On the right-hand side now, we see a clip from an old book that basically talks about 3 aspects of the Moorish Empire. The Caliphate, the Sultanate, the Khanate, and the Americanus. We ain't draw all of this. So what this shows is that all 3 aspects of the world in the old world was together. All in their distinct habits, but all of the same empire. Right?
I said, you don't got bronchitis no more? You don't got bronchitis no more? I can't still understand.
Mm-hmm. All 3 of them Muslims. Because the Americanos also represents the Amerindian, which represents the Naga and the Southeast Asian people. And peep this. What is that? This is the other science why I do. Oh, that book. This book. This is it. This is the title of the book. America being the latest and most accurate description of the New World, containing the original inhabitants and the remarkable voyages thither, the conquest of the vast empires of Mexico, Peru, and the other large provinces, territories, with the several European plantations in those parts, also their cities, fortresses, towns, temples, mountains, rivers, their habits, customs, manners, religions, their plants, beasts, birds, and serpents, with an appendix containing, besides several other considerable additions, a brief survey of what hath been discovered of the unknown Southland Arctic region. This book is going for $52,585. That ain't nothing once you get your full paper credit popping. Yep. in it, there's a whole section that talks about marijuana though. And it was basically building on the properties and what they would use the marijuana for, and how they would use that and what they called the black substance, which probably was DMT, as well as peyote and stuff. And the marijuana thing was very significant, and how, you know, they used it, and they would basically say that the Moors was able to astral travel with it. Well, that makes sense, because the other day NASA found this. NASA discovers THC on a meteorite fragment. Researchers who analyzed meteorite fragments in search of microbacteria data found the presence of THC, which is found in various plants, most famously in the cannabis plant. The discovery of THC on a meteorite fragment will have huge impact on the science of astrobiology. If chemical substances that change brain functions and result in alterations in perception, mood, consciousness in humans find their origin in outer space, what role then has this cometary impacts played on the human species?
We laughed about the launch pad. She said, I get anxiety because I know he's watching. So I just told him to line up.
It gives a whole new term to the meaning getting high. You see? You never heard anybody who ever smoked a blunt ever say, oh, I'm getting low. No, you get high, right? You get effed up, not effed down, right? Now, remember a while ago, I told you they said that they found a, hold up.
Wash my ass.
Yeah, but it gets better. How about this? NASA discovers a new planet covered with marijuana. NASA has announced this morning that they have discovered a planet completely covered with marijuana. A discovery that has completely taken scientists by surprise. Planet XC37Z-43 God 7, discovered using NASA's Kepler satellite, would also alleged to be one of the very few planets potentially habitable, who have detected sufficient levels of oxygen and nitrogen to support human life. The presence of marijuana on other planets could strongly encourage future generations to take interest in space exploration. Because now what this means is that they need to incorporate, this is why, remember the movie Planet Express, Pineapple Express? It started with the government dealing with the weed. This is what medical marijuana is. It's strained weed that they find in little pieces of stuff, and that's why it became so much more potent than the weed that was already used. Remember, they was talking about how up until 73, right before crack came out, there was this huge marijuana drought. Niggas couldn't get weed nowhere. Then the next thing you know, crack came out, and then that's when the government started experimenting on weed, and then that's when the people in LA and all of that started growing and became a real cultural phenomenon. Most of those people, again, came from the private and governmental sector. A lot of this weed is extraterrestrial in nature. So if there's a whole planet of weed where people can go, you think them people ain't trying to get there? So when you put one and two together, that means that the fragment of weed that they found on the meteorite is probably coming from a piece of this planet or some other planet, which means now weed can be known and used in hyperspace travel. This is the spice melange that was written about in the movie Dune. Remember the gas? And everybody was high, and it was the spice melange that allows you to fold space, and it's this brown substance. And then the navigators who took so much of it became like worms, and they would swim around in it, in the gas. This is it. This is it. This is why it's been illegal for so long. But now they ain't got no choice. Remember, George Washington had a hemp farm. He ain't have a tobacco farm. He grew hemp. Who taught him how to do that? When one researches the word Negro or nigger scientifically, genetically, or linguistically, what do the first facts reveal? Who or what real genealogy or consanguine history and makeup are you researching? What is the true linguistic biogenetic categorization and classification of the words Negro and nigger? The truth about nigger has much to do with the ancient genetic research technology and experimentation carried out in the Yucatan Peninsula at Mexico. Mexico, right, of Central and Mexico, Africa, and executed also at Patagonia, what we now today call Argentina. A core aspect of these ancient experiments had to do with the cross-ovum, cross-blood, and cross-gene hetero into the Homo perfection manifests. These scientific hurdles were accomplished at Patagonia of the southwest of Mexico by the ancient Moabites. So what this again corresponds to is the cross ovum generation by which black people became adopted by this term that was now used to switch the history. So they gave us their history and we took theirs. So when we talk about the Paleolithic man, the hybrid nigger, we're talking about the heterogeneous experimentally created Occidental, not Oriental, meaning that he was created down and then put up. He was created in the heat and then put in the icebox. Manifested from this. The Anthropithecus became the Australopithecus. And from the Australopithecus manifested what adapted into the troglodyte nigger, super chimpanzee, or what they sometimes used to refer to as the shaved ape. everything changes. Like Mauritania was right here. You know what I'm saying? But now Mauritania's over here. See what I'm saying? Everything was redrawn and readapted. Therefore, us being what we've always been has created a position by which the only thing we can do is go back to that. But we can't go back to that from the same purpose. You heard about all of those black people dying at Hajj, getting trampled. They just stacked all the bodies up and blamed all of them for it. Said it was the African pilgrims that messed everything up. Meanwhile, the Saudis is just as black as them. All of this, again, is reminiscent to the fact that black people have to go into their own understanding of who and what they are. That most of these foreign customs and cultures that they've adopted are not theirs. And they were never, just because they adopted these customs doesn't mean that they were adopted into them totally. Arabs was just as bad as the white. Arab is the white man over there. But there's some that still maintain the ancient connection. You know what I'm saying? There's a book called The Romance of Antar that one of the stories deals with what eventually became the end of the empire. But it's romance, they're poems written about Malik Ambar. The whole thing is about him. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, that's where the Treaty of Jeddah comes in. But my opinion is really more about establishing the position of the fact that we are the descendants of all of these people and that we've consolidated ourselves now as a state through the temple that allows us to function, to take over and create reliquaries to hold all of this stuff and be able to create museums where all of this is put back into its proper context while using it to establish the basis of a society and a people who understand how they are genetically and directly descended from it. That's the goal, because then the communities and things like that are there to celebrate and bring out this aspect of greatness, as opposed to trying to establish something from a vague basis. Like you prove the Egyptian aspect of America's origin by accepting the Moorish aspect. Because again, the hidden name of Ra is Re is Be. So the ancient Egyptians then are the Beys and Eels, who were the manifestation out of old Canaan, right? Who created themselves kingdoms in what we refer to as the Carthaginian Empire, who basically were able to create the ascendancy based upon being descendants from Noah, who was the one who set up the international law after the Great Rift, after the Great Flood. So because we dress like these people and embody these people today, and given the proper context in that, through a governmental interface, we now create the position by which people can have their own societies again. All of what we know as the ancient uh, dynasties of China and all of that, in the semi-modern aspect of that, all of that came from the time of Tamerlane, who they call Timur. Timur being the Moor. The Turkish dynasty, the Mongols, the Huns, and all of that came from him. He set up the first Khanate at the same time that we was breaking Rome down through the Caliphate. Yet we are not giving him the due as being a Moor, even though this corresponded with the expansion of the Islamic Empire. Genghis Khan, Kublai Khan, the first consecrated emperor of the Forbidden City, the Dragon Emperors, they all descend from him. He was like the Dracula. Dracula, all in people. That's why Dracula was a sheik who knew the Quran backwards and forwards, spending time under the Turkish Empire. So again, we are direct descendants from him. This is why we are Asiatic. So Moors, we see the empire in Islam as a whole because we're not caught up in the sectarian aspect of it, where I can be a Moor and have the Circle 7 Quran as my foundation or whatever, but I could still read the Quran of Mecca and still do whatever I need to do with that. You know what I mean? And it's catching on. You know what I'm saying? Like people are really starting to go in. People that's not even us. So the fact that we on it, we are the cusp, we are the future of so-called Black America as it moves forward. So long as we consolidate ourselves in a manner by which our states are secured, and we can take advantage of the fact that this is barbary. You know what I'm saying? That we are home. This is Africa. But in our consolidated way, it is Africa in its direct correspondence. Because we lie on the same parallel. So this septentrional map is accurate in terms of how we can view ourselves and our region or country today. So this with the exotic map is how we then rebuild aspects of the Societas Republicae Confederate Americae Sigillium Magnus by first establishing ourselves individually as the states and, making sure that we have a steady interest in the American system by which we're able to, extend and do the things we need to do as far as, discharging it, proper credit and all of that type of stuff, which once figured out leads you automatically to do not detain lists and not, being forced to contract with these people. Anybody have any questions? This was the Black Oath that Francis Wilson put out. We pledge allegiance to my own black self-respect and respect of all other black and shades of black people on the planet Earth, all of whom are victims of a system of racism, white supremacy. And I pledge to use all my life, energy, intelligence, creativity to eliminate all global racism, supremacy on the planet Earth, and to replace it with justice. First principle, second principle. The third. So that there can be peace, so help me God. The fact that white supremacy is in this oath twice, you know what I'm saying, automatically shows you where they're going. The difference between this and an oath of amnesty is the opposite. Yep. I'll send you the app. And that it'll have the explanation of what's going down. Anybody have any other questions? So out of all of these people, you know what I mean? To me, there's only like one straight MOOR. And that's him. He all the way here at the bottom. He did it. As well as the brother. He's an L as well. But for all accounts and purposes, C. Freeman L is the illest. But again, this falls under the Black Oath thing and the nigger problem.